Welcome to the Speculations reading series, a co-production of Dreamhaven Books and SF Minnesota, a multicultural speculative fiction organization that also does a midsummer convention Diversicon. Sign our guest book.
Sign the guest book.
Speculations readings continue monthly, mostly on Wednesdays. Next month, January 17th, I think, will be our 4th annual round robin meeting. So I'm encouraged to bring, let's say, 3 5-minute chunks that you could read if time allows. And then there'll be more readings after that. But tonight we're very pleased to have 2 first-time readers in this series, Briana Lawrence and Jessica Walsh. And we'll be read in whatever order makes you happy. Take it away.
So the allergies decide.
I forgot the Diversicon this year is July 27th to the 29th, and the guests will be Charlie Jane Anders and Brian Talwara.
Hey! Bye. And there's much rejoicing.
You might have to go first, I guess. Okay. I think the dust is attacking her. It is, I'm sorry. She's reading first now because I can't stop sneezing. Unless my allergies go away by magic.
I sign you in.
Actually, I think I'm good. Sweet. The power of Kleenex compels me.
Is that your first title?
That is the power of Kleenex compels me.
It's not a bad one.
It's nothing to sneeze at.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, you're
I don't
not.
think you are. There he is. I knew he was here somewhere.
Don't point to troublemakers. So I'm reading from my new release, magnifiqueNOIR. The short and simple premise is that it's a book about black queer magical girls. I wanted to write something that was me, but divided by 4 people. It's also got full color illustrations, so when I get to a picture, I'll actually like hold it up and open it so everybody can see it. So I will start. This starts with a girl named Bree who just started college, and so she's away from home for the first time. And if I stop to sneeze, I'm very sorry. In typical fashion, it decided to rain as soon as Bree hopped off the bus. She hoped that it'd have the decency to wait until she got back to her dormitory, but luck wasn't on her side that evening. The city was proving to be most unkind to its newest resident. Granted, the city had many new residents in the new school year, but Bree had traveled 2 whole hours from home to attend college here. She decided to follow in her older brother's footsteps. If by follow you meant make her mother stop hounding her. Bree wasn't the type who believed in televised hype of college. To her, it was an overglorified high school where her mother had insisted that she continue her education. It wasn't like Bree lacked intelligence, she just wasn't interested in pursuing extended versions of the lessons she learned in high school. If she had to label where her passions lay, she supposed the easiest word would be entertainment. It definitely sounded better than YouTuber, internet celebrity, or cute black girl who likes to play video games and bitch about their difficulty online. I think her mother believed in praying to a magic man in the sky, but not playing video games for a living. Bree supposed that was the one perk to moving away from home. It wasn't that she had a problem with religion, but there was something to be said about her mother's over-religion, especially when it came to Bree. Big Brother Trey had been spared from any warnings about the world, but Bree, oh no, she had been told time and time again not to fall into any nefarious temptations now that she was out on her own. Bree didn't need scripture to know that her mother meant sex. Of course, Trey had had plenty of partners before, during, and after college. Meanwhile, Bree had been labeled as fast for even mentioning a cute boy. She knew the double standard wasn't solely religion-based. Her mother had been young once upon a time and had been in 2 different relationships with 2 different men who decided that pregnancy was something worth abandoning. That being said, people's various interpretations of the good book certainly didn't help. Neither did the gossipy women of her mother's church. Praised him. Amen. If only they knew Bree wasn't only attracted to the opposite sex. Another perk of being away from home, she could further explore the whole sexuality thing. Bree sighed as she continued her unwanted walk in the rain. Her hair would regret it later, but she was, if nothing else, stubborn. She wasn't about to run the few blocks it took to get back to her dorm room, nor was she going to wait until the rain stopped. Had her mom been here, she could have called for a ride home. Bree frowned to herself as that thought crossed her mind. Had she just been thankful for being off on her own? Was she really missing her overbearing mother over something as basic as bad weather? It was true, though. Her mother would have stopped what she was doing to pick her up. Meanwhile, Trey lived in the same city as Bree, and she knew he'd refuse to interrupt his Saturday night because of a little bit of rain. In fact, he'd call her a brat for even wasting his time on something so trivial. So Bree resigned herself to her wet walk. Despite the pounding of the rain and the sound of students frantically running to their directions, Bree swore she heard footsteps flashing directly behind her. She shook her head and mentally chided herself for being paranoid. Of course she heard footsteps. There were people trekking through the rain. But Bree couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling that crept up the back of her neck. The steps were a bit too close for comfort. It wouldn't hurt to look back, right? Then she could laugh it off and keep walking. So Bree glanced over her shoulder and, "Hey, baby girl." All she had wanted was an uneventful, dry walk home, but the universe decided that she had to deal with some unwanted company. Not just any old unwanted company. Oh no, it had to be a random man on a self-appointed side quest, where he mistook stalking a young woman as a charming character trait. If Bree had to guess, she'd say that the man was old enough to be her father, whoever or wherever he was. This fully grown man had no business making eye contact with an 18-year-old girl's chest. Where is her mother now to condemn this man to hell? Then again, her mother would potentially blame this on her state of dress, as if she could stop the weather from forcing her into a wet t-shirt contest. "I'm not a toddler, sir." "You know that ain't what I meant," he said as he stepped closer. "What's your name?" "Unnamed protagonist," Bree mothered, hoping her dry humor would make him lose interest. Unfortunately, it made him persist. "That ain't a name," he laughed. "I don't have a name. My parents didn't bother entering one into the select screen." The man's smile immediately faded. The amused look drained from his face. "I'm just trying to be nice. You don't have to be such a bitch." The man snorted this time. "Y'all black girls are too much sometimes. Y'all always gotta have an attitude." "I guess so." Then Bree turned and walked off. "I ain't done with you yet." Bree rolled her eyes and kept walking. What a perfect way to end the evening. Not that she thought she'd gotten away from the creeps who referred to her as their baby. She knew that was a worldwide phenomenon, but did she have to face it now? "I said I ain't done with you." Bree had become accustomed to being labeled as unfriendly, or, in this case, a bitch, but it never went any further than that. Hearing the sound of someone running after her caught her completely off guard. She felt the man grab her and force her to turn and face him, his eyes wild and chapless curled in pure malice toward her. In seconds he had her on the ground, the back of her head crashing to a puddle on the sidewalk with a wet thud. "What the hell are you doing? Get off of me!" Maybe, if she screamed loud enough, someone would hear her. There had been people outside before. Someone had to come to her aid, right? Not patient enough to find out, Bree started to struggle against him, but he was faster and had her hands pinned above her head in seconds. "Stay still," he growled at her. His voice had a much rougher edge to it, and Bree was about to chalk it up to pure rage, but then something peculiar happened. His teeth shifted into sharp fangs. She's seen this kind of thing before in television series about teenage wolves, but such bizarre transformations are reserved for the world of fantasy and make-believe. Men's eyes didn't glow in a blood-red hue in real life. Men also didn't drool like rabid dogs, the saliva dripping onto her cheek before it was washed away by the rain. Bree wanted to scream, but she was too shocked to make any sound come out of her mouth. The creature, stood up, and with a sickening pop, its hand was detached from its arm to keep her trembling wrist pinned down to the ground. The sight of fresh blood leaking out from where its hand should have been was what did it. Bree screamed, the sound combining with the sudden rush of thunder that rumbled above them. "Shut up!" Then its other arm stretched forward, its hand clamping around Bree's mouth to muffle her cries. Its skin felt slimy against her lips, and she could taste something sour on her tongue as she kept trying to scream. Bree could finally hear a few people, but they were making the situation worse with their terrified screams as they loudly proclaimed the obvious. There was some kind of ravenous creature attacking a girl in the middle of campus. All the monster had to do was look at them to send them all running, leaving Bree all alone with the looming threat. In that moment, as her attacker looked down at her, many thoughts circulated through Bree's head. The first thought was one she shut down immediately. This never would have happened if she'd been nicer. Maybe she could have smiled more, or told the gentleman her name. She wasn't about to blame herself for the horrible situation she was facing, even when the creature sneered at her and asked, "Bet you wish you would have been more agreeable, huh?" The second thought she let linger, the danger her mother had warned her about. Granted, she was sure her mother hadn't meant that a literal monster would be leering at her right now. She was also sure that this wasn't the temptation that her mother had told her to resist. The third and final thought was one that made the tears flow down her face. She was about to die, and all she could do was shut her eyes and wait for the inevitable. But the moment never came. Bree slowly opened her eyes when she heard her would-be killer stumble away from her. She was still being pinned down by its detached hand, but the other that had been covering her mouth was now frantically wiping something from its face. It was a fluffy, purple substance, and there was a sweet smell to it that reminded Bree of her fresh-baked goods. Why can't monsters like you take no for an answer? At most, Bree had hoped for some kind of law enforcement to show up and attempt to fight the creature. Whether or not their bullets would work was debatable, but if they were able to get her to safety, that was all that mattered. Instead of men and women in uniform, Bree got a lone girl dressed in purple, white, black, and gray, complete with purple hair that sparkled like its own little galaxy. Was this actually real life right now? The rain had even stopped in favor of letting this girl sparkle. Literally sparkle! Who the hell are... But before the monster could finish, something was thrown at its face again. Were those cupcakes? Was she throwing cupcakes? While the creature was distracted, the young woman walked over to Bree and asked, "Are you all right?" The short answer was no. The long answer was hell no. Bree hoped that her face conveyed her feelings on the situation, because there's no time to explain her absolute fear and confusion. Being attacked by an inhuman creature was one thing, but being saved by a sparkly girl in purple? You fat bitch! The girl in purple smiled sweetly at the monster in front of her. Unrealistic situation or not, Bree had seen people smile like that after having insults hurled at them. This creature was twice the size of the girl in front of her, but that smile made one thing clear. This creature was about to die. Painfully. "What was that?" the girl asked, watching as her opponent got the last bit of frosting off of its face. There were nasty welts in its skin now due to the sweet, acidic frosting. Acidic frosting? What? You heard me. No one told you to interfere. Bree saw that everything was moving in slow motion now. The girl in purple held out her hand, a bright purple energy swirling between her fingers. The power came together and created what was, indeed, a cupcake. The girl giggled and threw at the monster, delicious treat smacking it dead in its face for the third time. "I don't mean to criticize your technique, but I don't think that's doing anything," Bree said. Was she trying to throw enough cupcakes to melt its face off? That would take a long time, and Bree was sure that her assailant would retaliate eventually. The girl smiled and knelt down beside her. She ran her fingers across the detached hand that was keeping Bree pinned to the ground, that sweet smell perfuming the area around them. There's now frosting smeared over Bree's gruesome handcuffs, and soon they melted away into clumps of skin and sugary cream. "How did you... I want you to get up and run." "What?" "Get up and run. Now." Bree wished she were brave enough to insist that she could help, but after the night she had no problem with leaving. To think she'd been so against running to her dorm before, but now she was running as fast as she could. Behind her, she could hear the girl shouting the words, "Cupcake bomb!" followed by a loud cry of anguish from the monster. There was a loud sound, an explosion of all things, and the ground rumbled from the force of the attack. Bree stopped to look behind her, completely ignoring the girl's demands to get away from the scene. There was a purple cloud of smoke spreading across the sky, and it made the area smell like a bakery first thing in the morning. Did that come from that girl? Bree's anxiousness to leave was giving way to curiosity despite all of her movie marathon training where black folks never survived these situations. She was running back to the scene. The remains of her attacker were now scattered about the sidewalk, complete with frosting and colorful sprinkles. The frosting was dissolving the monster as if wiping away any evidence of there being a monster to begin with. And there she stood, her purple rescuer, complete with high heels and sass as she asked, "Who's the fat bitch now?" So when you get to the end, you get a picture. And that's her doing the attack. So after that, Bree discovers that there was a group of girls, magnifiqueNOIR. They were around about 20 years ago on the same campus, and they defended the city. And she decides to investigate, and she finds out the girl in purple is actually a girl in her class. And so she should not pursue it any further, but then she meets a woman named Golden Blaze. She was in the group before, and she basically gives her two options. You can either forget what you saw, or you can take my hand. And so Bree ignores what her mother would do, and she takes her hand. And so I'm actually going to read that next part, which is a little bit further. The start of chapter 4. Bree wasn't sure how it had come to this. What she had wanted was an explanation. What she got was an invitation. Golden Blaze, that was the woman's name. She was the one Mariana reported to in her quest to keep their city out of supernatural harm. A former member of the original group, Blaze now acted as an advisor of sorts because she'd seen it all before. Now she was imparting her knowledge on the younger generation, the new magnifiqueNOIR. Despite remaining on the sidelines, Bree was sure that Blaze was dangerous when she decided to stand up and join the action. A woman who could open a door to an entire galaxy was not to be trifled with. Blaze confirmed everything that Bree had discovered during her research. magnifiqueNOIR had been a group of women who protected the city with fantastical powers and glorious hair. The group had been out of commission for several years, becoming a bit of a hidden legend in the city. With the monstrous threats resurfacing, Bree had decided that it was Blaze had decided that it was time for the group to return. But it's not much of a group, Bree had said to Blaze. Not if Mariana's the only one out there. Unbeknownst to Bree, that was exactly what Blaze had wanted to hear. Which led to Bree's current situation, standing on top of a tall building, watching a terrifying creature stalk through the streets as several people played the part of frightened bystanders. As a kid, Bree remembered loving heights. She used to be the girl who would climb trees in her Sunday best, much to her mother's dismay. She was also the only kid in junior high who didn't cry when riding all the tall roller coasters at their great American theme park. Sitting on top of the building brought those feelings back to the surface, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Don't overdo it," Mariana said as she stepped up next to her. Was that really the first thing Mariana was going to say to her? Couldn't she be a little bit more encouraging? "I know that. Besides, once upon a time, you weren't ready either." Mariana frowned as she remembered Blaze's words to the both of them before this mission. Mariana wasn't a big fan of having a second girl on the team all of a sudden. This led to Blaze reminding her of two things. There was no I in team, and Bree would need time to adjust, just like Mariana did when she first started. "Touché," she muttered. "Now the first thing we should do is jump in and kick that thing's ass? No. We should come up with a plan. How about this for a plan?" The Bree pointed to the large creature as it continued its destruction below. "Kill the thing before it pins some girl down and traumatizes her for life." Mariana remembered the distressed look on Bree's face when she'd been attacked. It was clear her determination stemmed from that moment. She could sympathize, but running in without a plan was foolish at best, and deadly if things took a turn for the worst. "Listen, I get it, but I'm going in." Then without missing a beat, Bree jumped off the building. Bree! Despite her anxiousness to jump into the fray, free falling from a building wasn't the smartest thing to cross off of her to-do list. Bree let out a loud scream that echoed around her, as if a reminder of how incredibly stupid this was. Thoughts in her head were working overtime, and she desperately tried to remember what came next. They talked about this before they left. Blaze had given her something, but Bree's heart was pounding too fast for her to remember what it was. All she could do was scream until her voice got hoarse, loose strands of her hair flying into her face, and hair! Her hair! Bree reached into her hair and clasped into the green bow that Blaze had given her before they left. As she fell, she squeezed her eyes shut and remembered watching Mariana transform at the ball. She remembered her bracelet snapping apart and a purple energy emitting from the pieces. Something like that would have happened right now, right? Blaze had said as much anyway, after giving one of those "the power is inside of you" speeches. The words had sounded so cheesy at the time, But as Bree held onto the bow in her hair, she swore she could feel something bubbling up inside her chest. It was a warm energy, something that was so eager to come out and show that terrible monster what she could do. She wished with every fiber of her being that she could have felt something like this with her own attack. All she felt that day was a cold sense of fear that left her shaking and crying until Mariana had come to her rescue. She was definitely thankful for Mariana's presence, but Bree wished that she could have protected herself. No, it was more than that. She wished she could have shown that thing why no truly meant no. Cosmic green, Bree whispered, her voice low and deadly serious. She had been falling at a dangerously high speed, but as the power welled up inside her, it felt like she was floating. It was hot and angry, ready to burst, ready to annihilate whoever dared to put their hands on her without her consent. Press start! Just like Mariana's bracelet, Bree's hair bow shattered with the pieces swirling around her. The pieces digitized into several bits, looking like they came out of an old video game. Retro. The word was retro. That's what Ella would say. Bree closed her eyes as she fell through the bits of green. This was it. This was really happening. Bree's hair tie broke as her hair flowed around her, the brown shifting into a shimmering green. Her clothes dissolved away as the power washed over her, creating a new look. Not just a new look, a new Bree. Black and green stripes with a hint of sparkling stars enveloped her body. A matching fluffy skirt puffed up around her hips. Her legs were decorated in black and white tights that ended in a pair of knee-high, chunky black boots. The entire sequence ended with a splash of green hitting her lips as a stylish choker appeared around her neck. In that moment, Bree felt like she could have taken on an entire army of monsters as she landed on the ground with a simple step. Bree suddenly understood why her favorite magical heroine struck poses after transforming. There was something empowering about this, and she felt the urge to give a twirl, point an accusing finger at the terrible fiend in front of her, and recite a dramatic speech about punishing it. She decided to save it for later. Maybe after she practiced in her room and came up with the epic line the moment deserved. And before it turned, that's what her transformation looks like.
Snazzy.
The monster in question turned its attention away from small shop number 3 in its rampage to focus on Bree. It was covered in too much hair. Hair that had become matted and smelled like a moldy basement. Bree wrinkled her nose in disgust. She shouldn't have been able to smell it from where she was standing, but the stench was overtaking the entire block like a rotten cologne. The creature took a step toward Bree and smirked a gruesome smirk. That was an impressive entrance, cutie. That single word set Bree off. It was another person, another thing that thought it had the right to be so familiar with her. There was such a lack of respect in its voice. She was sure that if she allowed their interaction to go on any longer, it would pin her down and tell her to be nicer. I'm gonna make you regret saying that, she hissed. Is that so? Well, I'm right here. Show me what you can do. Oh, trust me. I'll show you how magical I am. And with that, Bree, no, Cosmic Green, was on the move. She was so focused on her adversary that she didn't realize that she'd come up with the perfect line. Bree Danvers was never very fast. In high school, she could, at least, run fast enough for the bus driver to notice her when she was running late. She wasn't the type to break any records in gym class. That was for the sporty girls who didn't mind running a couple of laps. Cosmic Green, on the other hand, was fast. Not fast enough to create a time paradox or save blooming creatures with speedy red shoes, but fast in a sense that made her feel like she could outrun a large cat on the hunt. There was a tingle in the palm of her hand that grew warmer and warmer as she got closer to her target. She was relying on pure instinct to guide her forward as she slapped the palm of her hand against the opponent's chest. Bree would have been satisfied with the creature stumbling back or letting out a cry of pain, but it appeared that, as Cosmic Green, she could do much more. The green energy hummed around her fingers and, without warning, blasted through the monster's body. She watched as the pixelated energy left a large sizzling hole in its wake. Cosmic Green pulled her hand back as the monster's eyes widened to a comical size. With a weak, blood-stained cough, it collapsed to the ground. What did you do? In all the frenzy, she'd forgotten that Mariana was around, now transformed to staring at the hairy remains of the city's latest threat. Cosmic Green looked down at her hand and smiled at the energy surrounding it. 8 bits and pieces. And so after that, they learned how to work together, and then 2 more girls joined, and it's about their adventures or misadventures in the city as black queer girls who can pixelate enemies and throw cupcakes. And we have a bunch of prints of some
So I'm actually going to read from a different one. This is actually our series that we wrote together. We currently have 2 books in the series and are working on the 3rd one. It's an urban fantasy story that takes place in the Twin Cities. So we actually tried to use locations that are in the area that people would recognize. And I totally didn't write this last scene in our backyard.
Oh, the snake. Got it. I know where you're reading from.
Fagin, Randall to his parents, but only because they believed in calling him by his dreadful first name, stepped out of the driver's side and silently closed the door. He was a tall man, well-built, with lines of muscles pressing against his dark shirt. Stubble covered Fagin's chin, and his black hair reached past his shoulders, held back with a simple hair tie to keep it out of his face. Unlike Alex, he wore no jacket, claiming that the cold night air kept him alert and refreshed. Alex had retorted with a comment about Fagin being stubborn and not being able to understand why Minnesotans always seemed to be in denial over how cold it was. Fagin, in response, kindly reminded Alex that technically he too was a Minnesotan since he'd lived in the state for a number of years. Rather than a gun on his belt like his partner, Fagin wore a long, ornate sword across his back made of black stone that resembled obsidian. He preferred close combat and liked having the ability to see his opponent's face rather than keeping a distance, a method that Alex preferred. Scars on his body would have proven his love for close combat, but Fagin was good enough to not really have any worth mentioning. The few he did have had mostly faded with time, or remained as pale blemishes against his skin. He used to pass them off as common injuries. I just slipped on a patch of ice. But that was back when he still cared enough to make up excuses. The minute he was out of the SUV, Fagin was all business, his usual cocky grin traded in for the serious look of a hunter, his eyes ready to catch anything. Behind them, the back door of the SUV opened, and Doc slid out in silence. It's been an interesting trip, the creature said with an amused chuckle. Please tell me more about London and France and these places you're speaking of. The stories about the lack of flair in British cuisine compared to the elegance of French food was rather intriguing. Fagin's serious look cracked immediately, and he covered his mouth with his hand, trying not to laugh too hard when he saw the look on Alex's face. To his credit, the shorter man managed not to go into a monologue about how dull fish and chips were. That's not important right now, Alex said with a frown. It seemed rather important to you on the trip. In fact, I believe you were speaking a different language. Alex does that when he gets emotional. Fagin couldn't keep the smile off his face. Is that a human characteristic? Fagin shook his head and smirked. Only if your name is Alex. Let's get going. Alex hissed to both of them. I'd rather not stand out here in the cold for longer than I have to. It was bad enough that his lips were already becoming chapped, but now he could actually see his breath in the air. You're just not used to the... I know, Minnesota cold. Minnesota, is that what this world is called? Docs asked. Just the state. Fagin watched as Docs tilted his head, clearly confused. Then he chuckled and spoke again. The state's a part of a country. The country makes up a larger part of the continent, and there's 7 continents. Wonderful, you passed junior high school geography, Alex muttered. Before Docs could ask any more questions, Alex frowned. I'll explain it later, but he didn't mean it. The last thing he ever wanted to do was have a discussion about school systems with the demon. The group made their way across the decaying yards, mindful of stepping on the few leaves and branches that remained from the trees suffering through what was left of autumn. The neighborhood around them was silent, even the stray cats calling it a night as their yodeling died off in the distance. But now it was too quiet, a queasy feeling of unease making their stomachs churn. Fagin stopped at the house next to their target and leaned against the wall to survey the area and get his bearings. They'd received a call from Xavier Noxton, a former member of their group who had stopped being Fagin's partner 3 years ago. He was one of those hunters who preferred to work alone, not answer to anyone, and not be responsible for anyone else but himself. When Alex had begun training under Fagin, Xavier was mostly already out the door, and a month later he'd moved out. The two had split on good terms, and while Fagin and Alex shared the same warehouse home, Xavier had returned to a more nomadic style of living that included abandoned buildings and the basements of foreclosed houses like this one. They would hear from him on occasion, get some interesting leads on particular jobs, and even hunts that Xaver wasn't interested in. Other times, Fagin and Xaver would hang out in a bar, drinking tall mugs of beer that Alex would find distasteful, since he preferred classy, low-aged wine. Receiving a call from him in the middle of the night with just a place wasn't Xaver's style. He was all about the details, always telling them specifics before they would meet up. This snuff of a trap. Now that they were here, the sickening feeling of paranoia was only intensified in Alex's stomach. The silence had become unnerving and left a dry taste in all of their mouths. Dox watched the edge of the building, one hand pressed against the dirt-covered stucco. He knelt down and pushed his hand to the ground, the shadows slithering to embrace his fingers. And then he looked up and frowned at them as he rubbed his fingers together. There's blood, a lot of it. He paused and pointed past the house. Over there. Damn it, that idiot. Fagin swore under his breath. He touched the handle of his sword on his back and pulled it out of its sheath. Now he was certain Xaver hadn't called them to give them a job. He'd called them for help. What the hell did you get yourself tangled into? Alex held his gun up ready, and he stepped past Fagin and nodded to Dox to follow. Silently, the three crossed the last backyard to the house. As they approached, they could make out a limp body in the path. It was tossed carelessly between the trunk of a large tree and an old fence that had been worth something once upon a time. Bullet holes were lodged deeply into thick flesh, and the crushed grass soaked with blood that led around the yard and back to the house. Bullets could be found in the fence and the side of the house, along with large sword slashes and broken twigs from hurried feet running around the yard. There had obviously been a battle here, and recently. What was surprising was the fact that Xaver had lost, his preferred sword lying flat on the ground next to his body. Xaver had been a large man of Asian descent, made of muscle from head to toe. The thick scar across the side of his cheek was etched down his throat, a reminder of a young Xaver's first hunt that had gone horribly wrong. The scar had given him a raspy voice, something a casting agent would have seen as gold for portraying a hitman or an intimidating bodyguard. Xaver had been well known for hunting down demons with precision and expertise, but whatever happened in that backyard tonight didn't reflect that. There was something desperate and rushed, an attempt to stay alive, and... Alex looked up from the body in front of the house, his eyes scanning the windows. They were all closed, the glass was still intact, and not a victim of the violence that had taken place. Whoever had attacked Xaver hadn't ventured inside. Xaver had met them outside, drawing them away from the house. Something was inside that was worth Xaver's life. Fagin took a deep breath to readjust his thoughts and look away from his fallen comrade. Thinking the same thing, he nodded to Alex. And he led the way to the back door. Dox followed them in complete silence, all three standing at the thick concrete slab that led to a door that had once been white. The house was a simple two-story, the outside made of stucco with edging on the windows. The door had fallen off a long time ago. A piece of plywood was nailed over the door's window, while a completely new doorknob and deadbolt stood out against the rest of the house. Xaver lowered his sword long enough to quickly test the door. Completely immobile, locked tight. No doubt the deadbolt above it would be the same. We should back away, Dox murmured as he looked at the side of the house. There's someone inside. How can you tell? I can't. Then Dox smirked, a gesture he had seen Fagin do that seemed to irritate Alex. The shadows are telling me. Alex nodded, turning his attention back to the house. If someone or something was inside, the best course of action was to go in and attempt to take it off guard. The lock presented a problem, since the door was the most silent way of getting into the house. Knowing Xaver's style, the man had probably found a loose window frame in the basement, worked on it until the window popped out enough to open. Repeating the effort would have been pointless, as neither Alex nor Fagin were the best at breaking and entering. Their attempts would surely be heard by whoever was inside. But the problem solved itself a few seconds later, when the door actually blew out, broken pieces of wood flying back with Fagin and Alex. The two of them found themselves on the ground, just beyond the steps, Dox somehow managing to land safely next to the fence, though he did look stunned. There was a time to react as something heavy and hard settled on Alex's chest. Cold shot through his body like electricity, confusing his senses and making the gun completely useless in his hand. He couldn't move his fingers, much less his body, to respond to the threat. All he could do was lay there in shock as his vision focused on a person crouching over him, literally freezing him to death. The young man on top of Alex was fast and built as thin as a willow tree, his skin a deep dark brown. Long black hair fell down his back in messy braids that were held out of his face by a single band that struggled to keep a hold of all of it. His eyes burned a pale blue, and a look of seething hatred choking Alex as he glared at him. Then a second later he was away from Alex and jumping back across the yard. The ice cold disappeared with him, letting Alex roll over the ground and gasp for breath. "Are you all right?" Fagin knelt beside him, sword at it, ready, his eyes on the inhuman boy. Alex noticed that there was blood on the edge of the sword, showing Fagin had cut the boy and shoved him away. Alex pushed him back and sat up, immediately aiming his gun. 2 shots rang out through the night, and he heard one snap into the tree trunk next to the boy, the other hitting the middle of the strange white tattoo covering his arm. He didn't know what the tattoo was or what it meant, but from the boy's earlier attack, it was obviously the source of some sort of power, the cold having disappeared the moment he had let go of that hand. The boy cried out, the sound from his mouth sounding more reptilian than human. The bullet seemed to have the opposite effect of pain, and now the boy was on the move again, seconds after his arm was hit. "Don't hit that arm again, you'll only anger it. You need to knock him out." Dox's voice carried across the yard to whisper directly into Alex and Fagin's ears, giving them advice through the darkness. The two moved without so much as a look at each other and split, moving to surround the boy and divide his attention. Neither anticipated the sharp icicles the boy threw in their direction, with precision that rivaled Xaver's own accuracy. Alex ducked and rolled, the icicles narrowly missing, while Fagin blocked them with his sword and kept charging. The larger man reached the boy first, and took a hard, quick swing that was strong enough to break through the ice shield the boy was creating between them. It shattered like glass, shattering across the ground in small pieces as the boy caught the edge of Fagin's sword. He shoved him backwards, not even wincing from the cut the sword put into his hand, small lines of blood sliding down his fingers. "You need to knock him out," Dox spoke softly. "I heard you the first time," Alex growled, his eyes combing the yard. The full-on run and attack wouldn't work. They were outmatched, and they had no idea what type of demon this boy was. Maybe there was another option. Alex smirked to himself and pushed away from the ground, running straight for the boy. At the last minute, he dropped into a slide across the cold, wet ground next to him and aimed his gun up at the branches above them. Shots fired in quick succession, hitting the wood perfectly, and Alex rolled away as he heard the branches cracking above. The boy looked up at the branch too late as it came crashing down painfully across his shoulder. He stumbled back, clutching his right shoulder and throwing himself into the fence to dodge Fagin's next sword swing, the old wood whining and cracking in protest. The boy ended up crouching on the ground, panting as he watched them. He's getting ready to attack. Careful. Dox's voice stopped as the boy turned his head, those ice blue eyes not focusing on him, making his new target. "Fine then, let him be distracted while we take him out," Alex thought to himself as he quickly reloaded his gun. Dox's information was valuable, but this rogue demon was more a pressing matter. Might as well use the demon as bait, and if their captured one ended up killed in the process, that was fine. The collar hadn't been working the way it should have, and Alex was sure it was only a matter of time before Dox let his demonic nature take him over and attack them both. He would just have to find some other way to get information on the Storyteller. Getting rid of the 2 powerful demons was the first priority. Their target darted across the yard, the shadows around him rippling, but not responding fast enough to catch him. As he moved, ice gathered around the bleeding arm with the tattoo, swirling like its own little blizzard before he threw it at Dox, leaving him nowhere to escape. Alex leveled his gun to fire a shot, eyes trained on the back of the ice creature's head, but he never got the chance to fire. Instead, the ground around the boy reared up, plant roots breaking through the dead grass and slithering up into the air. They tangled around him and, without warning, yanked him down to the ground in a hard crash. The ice attack crumbled away before it could hit Dox, and the cracked gray roots wrapping around the boy's tattooed arm until the mark was no longer visible. The young man cried out in protest and pain, the rough branches squeezing around the wound on his arm, and the small cut in his side from Fagin's earlier attack. He struggled against the branches, but they only grew thicker, keeping him locked in place. What the hell are you doing, you fucking idiot? Are you trying to get killed? The sudden voice was female, coming from the front yard, through the broken entryway in the fence. She stepped around it wearing a pair of loose black pants and a black tank top. Fishnet covered her arms and the small exposed area of her waist. Her hair was a dark color, possibly red, but it was too hard to tell in the middle of the night. And as she walked up to Doc, she looked ready to slap him across the face. Sin, what are you doing here? Alex was surprised to read an expression on Doc's face, despite his lack of normal eyes. It was a mix of concern, surprise, and a touch of intimidation on this new girl. As she continued to berate him, her fists balled at her sides. Alex swore under his breath. He didn't even consider that Docs might have some sort of partner. Saving you, you moron. Forget slapping. This was the type of girl who threw punches, and she looked very close to the point of bashing Docs' face in. This isn't a good place for you to... Shut up! I'm not going to take advice from someone who was just about to stand there while an ice dragon froze his head off. Ice dragon. So that's what the boy was. So the main story that goes across all of them is they're actually looking for a creature called the Storyteller, which is this sort of mythical being that lives in a library full of books that are people's lives. And if he gets a hold of your book, he can actually change your story in any way he wants, which will change anything about your life as easily as writing down a new story. And it's what the characters want to do with that power and what they'll do to get it.